Good evening, everyone. This is Bruce Hughes. I'm chair of the Affordable House Trust Committee meeting. And tonight, we're going to have a great presenter, easy for me to say, Ms. Judy Barrett. And Judy is a long-serving professional planner in the state of Massachusetts and a tremendous authority on the subject. We just have one housekeeping order for the committee that we need to do. I sent out the minutes of the June 9th meeting, June 9th, 2021 meeting. If, people on the committee, Ken Coyle, myself, Jennifer Brady Sullivan, Mike, if you had read them and someone would like to make a motion to approve them, that's how we can start tonight.
I'll make that
one
motion.
member here, Bruce.
Okay. All right, good. So motion made. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now let's move on. Again, Judy Barrett, a woman who needs no introduction, but I'm going to let Judy give a couple of minutes. I'll give Judy a couple of minutes. Well, basically what we're going to talk about is, Abington, the Affordable Housing Trust is looking at creating housing opportunities in the Abington. The Old Colony Planning Council had written a housing production plan, which I sent to Judy, other people are familiar with, which is a great start. But Judy tonight will give us some guidance as to where we need to go. And, this isn't just going to be a 40B thing. It's going to be a lot of things. And Judy is tremendously skilled in this subject. So I've given you a tremendous introduction, Judy, and I'm going to let you go for it.
I feel like I've been set up to fall, but that's fine. So, I thought about what should I do tonight? And I thought before I sort of come in here and say, well, these are things you should be doing, I wanted to find out where your heads are about what you want to do, because the beauty of having an affordable housing trust under the state law, which is what you have, is that you have a lot of latitude about the things you can do. So I was going to give you some examples of what other trusts have done, bearing in mind that the ultimate purpose of the law and really your statutory charter is affordable housing. So when you're using Community Preservation Act money, that has one meaning. When you're using other sorts of funds, that has a slightly different meaning. But it is affordability. And, you can certainly think about how the trust might get involved in something that's a mixed income type of situation. That can be done. But the thrust is affordable housing. So let me give you a little bit of background. Long before the legislature created this municipal affordable housing trust law, communities around the state were creating groups kind of like yours, although not with as much authority as you have under the statute. And they were doing that because they needed an entity that would kind of know what it's doing for housing, the way a conservation commission knows what it's doing for wetlands protection and open space, or the way a planning board knows what it's doing when it comes to subdivision control and site plan review. But they're really, other than a housing authority, which really has a whole separate kind of jurisdiction, there wasn't an entity inside town government to take the lead on affordable housing, which is a hard conversation in a lot of communities to have. So way back in 1984, the town of Lexington created, through a special act of the legislature, this group called the Lexington Housing Assistance Board, which is jokingly called at the local level LexHab. And LexHab became a model for a lot of the early groups we have in local government that were kind of formed to take the affordable housing issue off the back of other officials and deal with it. And so what we have now in the state law is kind of it's sort of the best of what was done before, plus more authority, I think, that you guys have than many of those sort of early predecessors did. So you can be a bank to, a subsidizing agency, which is what I think a lot of trusts are doing. You can be basically a real estate broker, if you will. You can be an entity that buys land and makes it available for development. You can, be a group that provides public education around housing in your community. We have some trusts that have tried to actually be the developer. It doesn't work out well. People just don't, there's just too many legal hurdles in the way. But the ability to kind of buy land or take control of maybe town-owned land that might be transferred to you and put it out there to the development world and say, this is kind of what we want to have happen in this property. And let people come back and talk to you and say, fine, we could do that, or that's not realistic, but here's what might work. And then do a formal kind of what we call a procurement process to get a developer, take the property and actually get housing on it. You have the ability to do that. And you have an ability to be more nimble at that, if you will, than if the town didn't have a group like yours. So I'm going to encourage you throughout, don't give up your authority because you actually have a lot. And I don't know if you know that, but you do. And you need to think about how can you use that to get something done that will work in Abington, that's going to meet local needs, that might help you implement the housing production plan. But I think the most important thing you can do before you do anything is figure out what you want to be. Because the law gives you just so many models. I mean, when I say you can be a bank, that means many different things. That means you can provide, funding to a developer who might build some housing that you want to see, and you might have a mortgage on property. You might have a long-term deed restriction. So you're in the deal, but you're not having to do the hard work of making the project happen. You can be a landlord. You can buy property and ground lease it to someone to do affordable housing. And so you kind of control the affordability over time. You can work with the town on, if the town had available land, you can be the kind of go-between to make it turn from a vacant site or a closed school building or something to an affordable housing initiative. You can kind of do some of those things in a way that's a little easier than the town just kind of trying to do it on its own. But I think you have to decide what you want to be, and what of all the needs that are laid out in that housing production plan are the things that you want to focus on. I think that the worst thing that can happen to a housing trust, especially a new one, is trying to do everything. Because you just can't. Almost the best thing you can do is develop expertise in like one thing and get really good at it and then try something else. But I think that's where you kind of want to start, is what is it that you want to do? And then when you know what you want to do, what role does the trust want to play? So I kind of wanted to get a sense from you folks about where your heads are on all of that. I have flipped through the housing production plan. I can't say I wouldn't want you to quiz me on it. But I have looked at it. And so there's a lot in there. I mean, you could almost pick any number of things and say, we want to do this, that, or the other thing, but you can't do them all. First, you don't have the resources. Second, you don't have the people. So it's, what do you want to do? And I think that's what I wanted to hear from you.
Well, Judy, if I could speak first, and I'm going to open this up to other members of the committee. But a couple of initial things we wanted to do was get a list of town-owned land to see what potentially could be developed. And Abington also has 2 schools that have closed that are available: the Center School and the North School. Mm-hmm. And that was one thing that we were looking at, was to have someone come in and do an assessment of the suitability of those 2 buildings for housing.
Yep.
And we wouldn't finance it. What we would do is put it out, for bids for somebody to develop it and stuff like that. And we would oversee it, but we're not builders and we're not managers and stuff like that. But right. I think that's one of the things we're looking at. If any of the other members of the committee would like to speak up, I just wanted to give you an overview on that.
No, I think that's a pretty fair assessment, Bruce. Kind of get an idea of where we're at property wise. I like your idea behind, assessing both schools, seeing what's feasible, what's not. I agree with you there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Of course, we have the 40B at 0 Summer Street, but that's not in our purview, but that's still housing. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that I looked at on page 50 of the housing production plan is table 29. Mm-hmm. And it's a summary of Abington's subsidized housing inventory. Mm-hmm. Now, I know the ladies who did this was done a couple of years ago with Laurie Muncy, and and Laurie is still at the Planning Council. Right. Lisa Sullivan isn't. but that was a question that came up. But of course, when we had that 40B discussion, we talked about the land ratios and stuff like that. But as I said, this might come up in the topic discussion tonight, because it certainly is something, because 40B is housing in the town.
Mhm.
But, like what Michael just said, and I've said, if there's anyone else, Liz, I'd even invite you to speak up. Did you have any ideas on this at all, please? No, she's shaking her head. Okay. Well, everybody seems to be shy, which is amazing for the elected officials on this call. But,
So who's who? Jan, maybe you could just tell
oh,
me.
yeah, we should do
what
some
role here.
introductions.
That's okay.
Okay, all right. Well, on the committee, we have Ken Coyle, who is a selectman, myself, who's vice chair of the planning board, Ellen Delaney, I think is on the housing committee, Jennifer Brady Sullivan, she's very concerned citizen, she was on housing, and Michael is a selectman and a firefighter too, right, Michael?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the who's who. And we have a very interested citizen in this call, Ron Howe. Ron and his wife Pam live up near the Zero Summer Street and near the Center School. And Ron's a great friend of mine in church. He's on the UCC Church Council, but he was also the deputy fire chief in Abington for a million years, and his dad was a fire chief. So Ron and Pam have both been heavily involved in the committee as citizens, attending these meetings and as citizens of the town of Abington.
Yep. So where are the members who are not here tonight? Were they not able to participate? Are they on vacation? Or summer's always a hard time to get people together, but.
I think Ellen said up front she wasn't going to be able to attend
I see.
tonight.
I see.
I don't know where the other two are.
Okay, all right,
We're
that's
hoping-
fine. I'm just curious.
We're hoping that they come along. Of course, the first week of July rather, is,
It's very hard. We've had a
Uh,
lot of committees that sort of canceled meetings because there were just too many people out of town.
But
I, of
you
course,
know-
am not out of town, even though I would like to be, but I know a lot of people are, so.
I'm not on Randolph Street, so I'm not far.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think that maybe a little bit of you almost need like a sort of an action plan, because that housing production plan, that's big. That's got a lot of stuff in it, much of which you're not going to do.
Hmm.
So I think that you almost need to do a bit of a vetting process about what in that housing production plan are you going to claim for yours, and then focus on those things. I don't think there's anything worse than being a relatively young municipal affordable housing trust that's trying to figure out where to go, and you don't make a decision about, let's just try this strategy for a year, or let's try these two things for a year and see how it goes. And you can always got to revisit your plan, right? But if you try to you couldn't possibly do everything that's in that plan, and you shouldn't try, because it's not really even your role. But I think being clear about what you want. So for example, if there's a school property that the town would be interested in making available for housing, because I'm just coming into this blind. I have no idea what conversations have happened. But if there is a school property that you think the town would be willing to make available for affordable housing, town meeting's going to make a decision. Maybe they already have, but somebody's got to make a decision to transfer that over, or for the school committee to decommission it as a school site, and then to make it available to you guys so you can do something with it. But I think before you even get to that point, you probably want to spend a little bit of money to get a code official or somebody to just go into that building and do an assessment of its condition, so that is this a type of a school building that's even reusable for housing? Because sometimes those projects have not been very successful. Sometimes they have.
Well, these buildings have already been de-assessed, I love that term, from
Yeah.
the school department. So they're under the jurisdiction, I think, of the selectmen
I see.
right now. So that's something we have going for us.
I think Mike has his hand up. Mike, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say there was a access school committee a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And they looked at each school and what it would cost to tear it down and the asbestos abatement and stuff like that. So we should definitely pull that up again. I know there's copies floating around. I have one in my email somewhere. That would be a good start, like you said, Judy.
Yeah,
And then really look at the schools especially.
right. I mean, that might be a great project. It's an existing property, and if nothing else is going to happen with it, it might be great. But I think you need somebody to go in there and do an assessment, aside from its environmental conditions and so forth. Is this a structure that, given its current layout, can be converted to housing in a relatively efficient way? Some of the school projects don't work out that well because the amount of change that you'd have to do inside would just make a very cost prohibitive project. But some schools, the way they're laid out, it works well. But I think you want somebody to be able to go in there who's a design professional, an architect or an engineer or something, and give you some feedback about what's feasible. That, I think, is the first order of business. What's feasible?
Well, you're writing our action plan for us. Thank you, Judy.
Well, you need an action plan. I mean, you really
Yes.
you do. And I mean, if you did nothing else for the next 6 months, but just focus on that one project, that would be doing a lot more than some trusts do that try to do too much.
Mhm.
But I would say that sounds to me like an opportunity that might be worth pursuing. How much discussion has there been locally about trying to make one of those properties available for housing? Like, I'm coming into this blind, so I don't know who's talked to whom.
Scott?
So I think the discussion is only just begun, and it's begun mostly amongst this group. I mean, it's obviously something I support. I think this group supports it, but the next step with it would be to do a community reach out to the state, the folks in the area, the abutters, the stakeholders. I know that initial report had suggested there's one of these schools has a piece of a playground and stuff that's attached to it. So there'd have to be some considerations on how to deal with that. I think overall it's embraced, but as long as it's done in a really careful manner, because there's multiple issues in that area as far as traffic concerns, and I think you've heard us talk about a proposed 40B, which you actually sat in on with me with the developers recently and had that conversation, but that's right around the corner from this particular spot. And I don't think it would lend itself to be more than 8 to 12 units of housing at the most anyways. But then you run into that sort of, is it attractive at that kind of number to a developer to come in and take an old building and restore it?
Well, it would probably be a low-income housing tax credits project.
So
Okay.
as far as like your recommendation, I do have, and I just recently put out an RFQ for house doctors, for engineers and architectural services.
Good.
So I have them all sort of selected, and I have 3 different firms that I've worked with before too, that all scored very high. So we have access to that, and that could be turned around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I think really, if it's kind of up to this committee, as you said, to decide what you want to focus on. If you want to focus on that, then I think you're, and it's a plug for Judy, but I think you should have a consultant to work with you to do the reach out to the community, to the area, to see what is going to work to keep everybody, happy, or as happy as we can. I mean, we do have issues out there as far as, like I said, that playground, we do want to preserve that. We don't want to lose that. So we have to sort of find a way that it all works together.
And of course, the North School up at North Avenue Center abuts the former New England Art Factory, which has been proposed for about 100 units or so, mostly studios, but a few multis. And that seems to be in flux. That's been proposed for a bunch of years. So say you had 10 or 12 units, and I think that's realistic for the North School as well as the Center School. I'm going to throw this out. I mean, this is the Affordable Housing Trust, but what if we did both of those, and what if we did one of them market rate? I'm just throwing this out. Maybe the Center School is market rate because there's a 40B around the corner on 0 Summer Street. Or both of them is market rate because they're going to be small buildings.
You wouldn't do that. The town would end up doing a 30B disposition process for market rate housing, but the housing trust really doesn't do that.
Okay, I'm just throwing this out.
Doing it if it were affordable housing.
Yeah. Okay, just throwing this out.
Now, what you could do, and this is up to the select board and the town manager, is if the town simply sold those properties for highest bid, just basically, Scott, just a kind of highest bid disposition, would the town be willing to put that money into the housing trust?
Probably, but I think the problem is with one of the buildings with North School, probably, yes. With the other project, probably not, just because of the delicate, it's in the middle of a neighborhood. It's kind of, it's sort of a tightly fit area that it wouldn't, I don't think just giving it to somebody who's going to maximize it would be beneficial. Now, the other property probably lends itself to, to doing that.
The North School.
The North School, yeah. And for the fact that I think, we got estimates on the demolition that were in excess of $1 million 3 years ago. So
Right.
I mean, we would just as soon do anything to get it back on the tax roll. I don't think we need, we're not looking for big money for it either.
I'm just thinking that, the companies, for example, that have worked in Brockton, the various developers that have done things in downtown Brockton, that's all super tax credit and stuff like that. The various things that they've done. I mean, Abington is right next to Brockton, conceivably with a town that has commuter rail and stuff like that. It's not adjacent. It's not as close to the commuter rail as the downtown projects are in Brockton with a bad Brockton area transit access. But, that conceivably could be an attractive project to someone like that too.
Well, Scott, I mean, I do think the town, kind of in partnership with the trust, could put out a developer disposition RFP for mixed income housing on one of those sites and put restrictions in it as to what you want. So, you don't want the playground destroyed, or you want the building substantially reused, or if there's going to be some new construction on the site, some maybe limit as to how much. So that maybe you don't get the absolute highest bid you might get if somebody was going to buy that property and just tear the school down. But you might get some money, and you might get the property redeveloped in a way that gives the trust a raison d'etre to get involved, but also gives the town, I think, the ability to maybe get as much money as they can. Which I'm just saying that maybe that money could then be put into the trust. And I'm these are policy decisions that go over my pay grade, but they're just options, I guess, is the point.
Yeah, I mean, worst that comes out of something like that is you get some affordable housing. You get some housing that probably will attract newcomers to town, people who might eventually put an investment into the town. You get a piece of property back on the tax rolls, which is huge. We may not make a lot, or we may not even make anything, but we'll start collecting taxes on it again.
Right.
And we can work with the, like you said, put in those certain restrictions in there that would preserve the ball field and some of that open space, maybe even create some better parking and access for it. So that's definitely a win-win all around, and probably where the committee should start, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a possibility. Your role is more advisory in a way. I mean, it's not the kind of project you necessarily would invest in if you had a lot of money, because you've got this mixed income thing going on. But you could, I mean, it's certainly possible in a mixed income development for a housing trust to be, like an equity investor, if you will, for writing down the cost of the affordable units, or if it's a home ownership project, being the one that is the monitoring agent and gets, and maybe invests in first-time home buyer support, but then also, keeps a percentage of the sales proceeds or something, and the market rate units go do the market rate thing.
I really think these would be a good place for us to start as a affordable housing trust, the redevelopment of these two properties, and then build on it from there.
So I would take one at a time.
Mhm.
And I think the question would be which one makes the greater sense, which one has the greater possibility for moving quickly rather than slowly, which one may be the easiest one to redevelop. And, I don't know the properties, so I'm just kind of talking through my hat here, but Scott, if you had some preliminary work done on one of those sites or both of them, it might make sense to have, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just the hazmat investigations, that's all.
Yeah. It might be worth it to have an architect go out, take a look at the building, take a look at the grounds from a kind of a landscape architect point of view. I mean, a good architect can do that.
Yeah.
And give you a sense of what are the reuse limitations and what would need to be, how would you make that project interesting to a prospective developer? And bear in mind, it may be a nonprofit developer
Yep.
It may not be a for-profit, but how would you make it interesting to them? I think an architect can help you with some of that technical thinking. If there's a concern about, sort of like a public process to sort of roll this out, I mean, if you wanted us to, we certainly could help with that, but I'm not an architect, and I can just tell you, having been through this kind of project, you need someone with a design background to go in and kind of advise you what's real on this property.
Well, Judy, do you have people in your universe that you could draw on if we were to engage you in something
Well,
like this?
I do. I'm just also trying to respect the fact that Scott said that he's just done like an RFP for a list, right? You're gonna have a list.
I do. I have people. I have a list of people that we
Yeah.
can, that we don't
Yeah.
have. No.
You can pick off the list is probably the easiest thing to do. I mean, we do have people we work with, but whoever the town's going to work with, I'm sure would be fine. And now that procurement is handled. It's just done.
Honestly, this is stuff that we've talked about in the committee, is having an architect, having someone do, beyond the structural evaluation of it, have an architect, someone with a vision, someone who could potentially give us a potential sketch of what this thing could look like,
Yeah. I mean, that's a possibility. I think what you really need the most is a reality check on what's it going to take to make this usable to a developer. What are the constraints you need to be aware of that might affect the purchase price for the developer, and help to kind of define what you want to see come out of that project. I would encourage you to be careful about getting sketches, and here's why. Although they can be helpful in a public meeting, they also can come back to bite you later when the actual development proposals come in. And now real live developers whose profit is going to be on the line have a somewhat different concept from the architect. Is still getting at the sort of ultimate objectives of the project, but maybe in a different way. And now you've got a public that's ticked because, well, we thought that building was going to be built,
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit careful. It's almost better, Bruce, I think my experience is, to maybe take some pictures of examples of real projects in other towns.
Mhm.
They don't look the same. They're like different, but they're school projects, right? They were school dispositions, and this is what happened. And so people can see something's real and they're not the same. But these are addressing similar principles. I think that's an easier way to get people to see what might happen, but not lock them into one vision that then when they don't get it, they're ticked.
Well, yeah, there are plenty of school redevelopment in Whitman. There's on Route 27, there's a similar size right in the center of town. There's a similar size school to the North Schools. It's near the post
there?
office, Scott. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And that potentially could be something in a picture of a similar size school that's been redeveloped.
Yeah, so I don't know how big the school is that you're talking about. We have a number of school redevelopment projects that happened in the late 80s and early 90s, just before school enrollments took off again. But we had this lull, nobody remembers this, but in the 1980s, the school enrollments kind of dropped. And so towns were getting rid of schools. In my town, Duxbury, they actually consolidated a school and made it one of the old schools into a library. And then all of a sudden, the school enrollments picked up again, and everybody went, "Oh my God, what have we done?" There are plenty of examples out there of different size schools that have been done. Some of them are a little bit older, but they actually look nice because now the vegetation's mature and people can see what something looks like. I'm thinking of one in particular in Marshfield that actually came out quite nicely. It ended up being not exactly congregate housing for seniors, but they're all very small units and there's some shared space in the building. It's very nice. So I think that there are examples out there, and that might be the better way to go. And then the public doesn't feel like they've been sold a bill of goods later when someone comes back with maybe an idea that meets your objectives, but looks a little bit different.
Yeah, they're doing one in Holbrook now, which is the next town over from here.
Right.
And that's something we can look at,
Yeah.
committee, Scott, everybody, because that's a 5-minute ride down 139 in Holbrook.
So I think what you want to do before you do any kind of public outreach is get a design person into the building.
Mhm.
So you know what the heck you're even talking about. Because the worst thing you can do is kind of go out there with this big public thing like we're going to get rid of the school, we're going to have housing and blah, blah. And then some architect comes back and says, are you people crazy? So I would get an architect into the building first, so you kind of know what the parameters are.
Mhm.
And then think about how do you want to communicate out with the community, bearing in mind that you're probably going to be entering this discourse at the same time that a 40B application is hitting the Board of Appeals.
So Scott, we're going to rely on you for that,
Yeah.
and work with the committee on that. I think that's a marching order out of this meeting tonight,
Yeah. So
as much as I can tell the town manager what to do.
So Massachusetts, just so you also all know this, just so I'm upfront about it, Mass Housing Partnership engaged me to help your Board of Appeals if and when that project comes forward. So I do a lot, just so you know about me, I do a lot of work in housing, but in different ways. And one of the things I do is I'm on the consultants list for Mass Housing Partnership to help boards of appeal with comprehensive permits. This is like, that's what I'm doing at 7 o'clock tonight. I'm working in Milton right now. They have 5 40Bs and a 6th one just came through the door. So I have sympathy for Abington, but not that much. It's like, really, guys, it's tough. So I work with the ZBAs to help them get through the process. So I just want you to know when that project hits, I'm probably going to be working with them. And before that ever hits, I'm supposed to do a training with them. So I just don't want to put you guys in a funny position where people might see my face at an occasional ZBA meeting, but I'm also working with you on this. So just be aware of that. I don't think it's an issue, but I want you to know.
I hope if you do a training with the ZBA in Abington, again, I'm on the planning board and chair of this thing and also chair of the Community Preservation Act. I have a lot of hats, but hopefully there'll be some. Is Bill Clark still the planner in Milton? By the way?
No, Bill retired.
Oh,
It's now Tim Cherwinski, who was there as an assistant planner a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Went on to Boston Planning and Development and then came back and took Bill's job.
Oh God, people that I've worked with at the beginning retiring. That's.
They all are.
I know. Well, I'm not.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Jude.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I just pop in 1 second, Bruce?
Yes.
So
Yes, go ahead.
from a couple of meetings that I attended with you guys, I know there was a strong feeling about making senior housing, affordable senior housing. And I just wanted to see if Judy could touch on that as sort of a restriction, a deed restriction or whatever, and whatever project they decide to move forward with.
One of the hardest things to do is affordable senior housing. And there's a number of reasons for it. Seniors who need rental housing need deeply affordable rental housing. And we don't have subsidizing agencies anymore. We have agencies that give out project eligibility letters to developers who are doing mixed income developments and then send them to the wolves with the Board of Appeals at a public hearing and hope it all comes out right. I don't mean to be cynical, but honest to God, I live, eat, sleep, and breathe 40B. We just don't have a lot of subsidy, so it's hard to make affordable senior housing work. A mixed income type of senior housing development has a little more chance, but you have to be careful with the deed restriction. For starters, DHCD will not allow an affordable housing deed restriction to preclude people under 18 from living in the development. The deed restriction cannot say everybody in the project has to be 55 or over. Can't do it. I'm an example of someone who at 55 had a child under 18. And the logic is that we have households now that are forming second times over, and people who are 58 have kids in high school. So you have to be careful with the restriction. But you certainly can have a restriction that says at least one person in the household will be 55 or over. That's absolutely allowed by federal law and doesn't, break any rules with them. But you have to be careful about making the restriction so exclusive that you unwittingly preclude people from living in the development who happen to have a family member who's under 18. That cannot be done. It's a fundamental fair housing question. It becomes a question no longer of providing housing for older adults, but discriminating against people who happen to have a family.
But we have a lot of needs in this town, as I think you're getting the affordable housing aspect of it, also the senior housing aspect of it. We have to start someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we're going to make everybody happy.
Probably not.
going to be a community, probably going to be members of our community that are going to be unhappy if we decided to do, affordable housing and a mixture of affordable and, for families and stuff like that, excluding, and there are going to be people who said we should just do senior housing. I think we can't be exclusive. We have to be inclusive. And, myself, I think once we get going, we can do more of what we want to do, but, we can't just lock ourselves into one thing.
I'll tell you one thing that'll happen, if you try to find a developer and we bake this into some sort of an RFP that we want some sort of restriction on it, you're gonna really limit the amount of developers that are even
You
remotely.
may not get anybody.
Yeah, it's.
They're all gun shy now.
Yeah. How many of them came
here's-
back and said, I don't know, 3 of them came back to Duxbury, right? Said, hey, we need to drop that 55 and over. We can't
So
sell it.
here's what's going to happen. Bruce and I are old, right? We're all going to die someday. And the next generation after us is a much smaller group of people. So anybody who's thinking right now about downsizing needs to think about, how am I going to sell my house when I'm 85? I might be 65 now, but when I want to sell this thing later, and most of my peers are in the grave, what's the size of the market? So developers are definitely gun shy, and it's sort of led to this whole movement toward age targeted. So age targeted is a cute term. It basically means a dwelling unit where, if it's like 2 stories, that the master bedroom's on the first floor and there's an ensuite bathroom. It's sort of basically designed for 1-story living, but a couple of bedrooms upstairs for when the grandchildren come. So that's kind of this concept that has evolved to design housing that is more appealing to an older adult buyer.
That's what we were talking about the other week with the Bobs. In the history of Abington, and this predates you, Scott, but there's been at least 2 proposals for age, 3. The Strawberry Valley Golf Course was originally proposed to be age-restricted housing, and also, a mixture of that, like a nursing home. And the town saw the opportunity to buy that, turn that into a golf course. The Griffin's Dairy property, I think that was going to be a housing and some age restrictions on that. And most recently was 121 Randolph Street, which is 3 houses down from my house. And that went through a lot of iterations, but none of these projects would fly as age restricted housing. And now, Strawberry Valley is a golf course, and the other Griffin's Dairy is a public park, and 121 Randolph Street is Ken Ryder, and it's market rate housing. Allison Sullivan lives there, our state rep, right down the street from me, on the shores of the Suma-Tuscocant River, as Liz and I would lovingly say, because we live in the same neighborhood.
So, I guess I'm trying to figure out how I can be the most helpful to you guys at this point. And I think the best recommendation I can make is, if you have an interest in both of those schools, but focus on one, that would be my suggestion, unless you want to kind of find out what's the more realistic option. And that's another way to think about it, that if there's 2 schools here, and I don't know anything about these buildings, right? So, you may already know the answers to what I'm going to say. But if it makes sense to have someone look at both and advise you, this one's kind of readier for the market than that other one is, then that might tell you, okay, we're going to focus on this one. If you kind of know the answer to that already, then just pick one. You almost can't go wrong, because no matter what you do, somebody's going to hate you for it. You just got to know that somebody's going to hate you for it. You'll lose some friends, you'll gain some. And
I've been elected official in this town for 24 years, and nobody likes me. Liz will tell you that.
So I'm just saying, I think you got to kind of, you need to get to a point where you can say, this is what we're going to do. And we're not going to do all these other things that we might be interested in. This is what we're going to focus on. So if you already know that one of those buildings is what you want to focus on, go for it. If you think you kind of want to make a decision and you're not sure what way to go, then, I'm kind of turning to you, Scott, and saying, because you're the town manager, does it make sense to kind of have a design person go out and look at both buildings? But if you already know the answer to the question, pick one and say,
Yeah,
this is what we
yeah.
want to focus on. Hmm?
The beauty of it is I think that they're sister buildings.
Yeah.
Oh, I
They were both-
see.
They were
Really?
both built in the same time. The
Really?
Works Progress Administration in the
Yeah.
30s.
And they look very similar in design and, yeah, so there's quite a similarities, but yeah, I think it does, I think definitely we'll get somebody out to look at probably both buildings, because
Yeah.
even if, you know, it just makes sense to look at them both and then decide, say, look, let's focus on one or the other, or let's get this one done. If it works, it's successful, we know we can move right on to the other one.
Right.
Scott, another question I have for you is, say we did, and I'm not going to say which one, but say we decided on one building initially. And so, and we still had the other building. Could we potentially hold a building that we don't choose and, you know, preserve that for future use, or would we have to dispose of it? What do you think?
No, there's, I mean, you can, I mean, right now, they're in the custody of the selectmen.
Yeah.
So
What condition are they in, Scott?
they're mothballed. I don't know, how long have they been mothballed?
10, about probably 8 or 10 years.
So, you know, my guess is they have leaky roofs, kids break in them, we have them boarded up. They're significantly, you know, structures, they're brick structures. They look like they're solid. I'm guessing though that there's a good amount of hazmat or asbestos in there. But I've seen, you know, for example, look at the old Armory in Plymouth. You know, if the shell is good, they'll go in and they'll frame a whole new building inside the building.
Right.
And those walls are just walls. They'll core through what they need for plumbing. They're not going to use any of the wiring. They're not going to use any of the plumbing.
That's all going to come out. Right.
Yeah. The roof will be new. The windows will be all brand new. But that structure in both buildings looks like it's probably solid.
I know that happened in Braintree. They had a school that they had to fire, but the brick structure was intact. And I think Frank Messina did that.
Yeah, he did. I know the building.
And he went in, you know, he went in and redeveloped it. You go by there and all you saw was the shell, but he redeveloped it because the brick, you know, the brick structure was solid. So, yeah, I think we've gotten some terrific ideas tonight, Judy. And of course, you know, you and I have known each other for a long time, and Scott's known you for a long time. So you have
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of expertise.
He's
And
not
we
as
really
old as we
appreciate-
are, though.
Well, yeah. Well, I appreciate it. My wife's in the other room. But no, we really appreciate your coming out tonight. You're going to get a new planner in Duxbury. Val Bassard is going to Kingston.
He's going to Kingston. I know. I heard that last week. So you know, that'll be an interesting kind of power struggle between the town manager and the planning board. But fortunately, you know, I don't have to get involved in it. But
Sounds like time for a
I'm sure-
committee.
Pardon me? What?
Time for a selection committee.
Oh God.
Well, I'm not going to get into Kingston either, but Kingston is a, yeah, it's an interesting place too.
Well, it is. They've been through a lot. You know, what they need most in Kingston right now is just some stability.
They need stability because they had that selectman recall. You know, and Tom Bott was the town planner for a long time and he left, and, you know, we all love Tom. And, you know, but he's happy where he is now. So,
Yeah, I think he is.
yeah. Well, okay, we had an hour or so.
That's
Does-
fine. And I mean, I would just say, why don't you, you know, get somebody to go out and look at the buildings, give you a sense of, are they both basically ready to go? Is one maybe in better shape than the other? Give you an order of magnitude sense about maybe the readiness of redevelopment, if you will. No one's going to give you, I think, not with like just a walkthrough. I don't think they can give you a sense of what it's going to cost necessarily, but at least can give you a sense of how ready for redevelopment are they. And then you got a project.
And then, as Scott said, assess public input.
Right.
You know, how would they feel about the project
Right.
and stuff like that. And then I think once we have an assessment of the buildings and what they're capable of being, and once we get some positive public input, and then we can go from there. We could potentially, you know, hire you or someone like you to advise us. And
I think that would happen prior to going out for
Okay.
organizing and meeting with the neighbors and.
Okay, so here's our order then. They have an architect or a building assessment, hire someone like Judy or Kathy, something like that. And then get the neighbors and then work on putting a project together, the finances, outside people and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I think we've got an action plan tonight.
I think that in some ways, I don't know that you need to worry yet about finances. I think what you need to know is this building going to be interesting to developers? And if you find out that it is, then I think you want to do a bit of a public process because first of all, you all may know what the housing production plan says, but I absolutely guarantee you most people in Abington don't. So you need to do a little bit of why are we doing this? Because we have this housing plan and we're trying to manage, the 10% issue. And we're trying to meet community needs. And here's what the needs are in our community. You have to do all that legwork because I guarantee you no one's going to get it, especially if, dare I say, the shit has now hit the fan about a 40B. It's just like, make it possible for people to digest why you guys are even doing this. I think that's a very important thing. So people can go to a forum and have their questions
Looks like a
answered.
storm is definitely around here, not. Oh, so
Hello, who is speaking, please?
I think it was Mike and he turned off his microphone again.
Yeah.
Well, another thing too is an education on the housing production plan.
Right.
What it is, and it was approved by the planning board, and then I presented it to selectmen and they approved it. But I mean, I could give a summary of it, or potentially we could invite Laurie Muncy from Old Colony to come and do a presentation on it at a public meeting. Laurie said to me, I asked her about doing this. I'm still friends with her, even though I don't work with her anymore. But, she said that they don't get involved in these things once they're done, but maybe I could appeal to her to come out and do a presentation on it too. But also stress that we're not asking anybody to approve it. That's already been done.
Exactly. But I think if you're going to start talking to the public about a site, that part of that conversation needs to be, why are we doing this? We have this housing production plan. Here are the goals of the plan. Here are examples of strategies in it. We're working on one. Boom. This building has potential. It could be, some number of, some number of units. We want to get a developer in to kind of work with us to sculpt a project that will be consistent with the character of the town and meet some housing needs, affordable and market rate, and find out and then do a presentation about what other towns have done. People sometimes think, oh my God, it's my town. And I hear this all the time. 40B is a cookie cutter and it doesn't apply in my town. Well, I hate to tell you, but it does. And so people need to understand that, so you have choices as a town. You can either kind of lie there and go, oh my God, this thing is going to be horrible and there's nothing we can do. Or you can say, well, there are things we can do. And they're going to be incremental and small, but they're going to fit in the community. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's kind of the pitch you probably want to take. That's my opinion, just based on what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, this is recorded, so your words have been recorded for posterity now, Jude.
Right, including my cursing. That's great.
Well, Abington,
Anyway,
can you bleep that out?
probably not, but that's fine. So let me know, if there's a way I can be helpful to you, kind of moving forward with this, or if someone else can, I can, even refer you to somebody else if you think someone else would be better suited to work with the town. But let me know.
Well, I'm always objective, being on several boards, and Scott has to be objective. But
Right.
I
That's
can
fine.
I can say that I'm familiar with your work in a good way. And I'm sure Scott is too. All right.
Well, thank you.
Well,
I
thank
have
you.
to get onto this Milton meeting now. It's one of the 40Bs is on tonight, so I got to get to Milton.
We'll let you go, but I just want to keep our committee on here for a moment.
Sure. All
Judy,
right.
thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah,
Thank you,
take care.
Judy.
Bye-bye.
Good luck.
Okay. So the post meeting was this won't be very long, but
Do you actually have a forum?
I'm not sure. No, we don't.
No, because it would be nice. Well,
to have them.
I mean, we can ask them all to watch this, but it would be great to have them vote on.
Yeah.
Your action plan or put. that-
Well, I think we will, I think I'm going to try to schedule a meeting for a couple of weeks, if that's possible, because people will be back from vacation. Liz, what's 2 weeks from tonight look like as far as the date?
Kevin, that'd be the 21st,
21st?
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we should act on this as soon as we can. Obviously, we can't act to approve this action plan. I was taking notes. And I know you were, Liz.
I won't wait to bring in an architect, though. I can actually move, because it's in the best interest of the town to take a look at those buildings anyways, but it is gonna be money, there's gonna be monies and it's gonna have to come out of the trust. But I don't mind, engaging and getting somebody out there sooner than
So
later.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think as long as Scott feels comfortable starting with the architect and, then we can touch base in a couple of weeks and form the action plan, like you said.
Yeah, I think we can, I think we know what the action plan is. Judy said, basically assess the buildings, potentially hire a consultant. And if the thing seems like it's going to go, solicit public opinion. I think those are the three things in order of which, and which we can do immediately as an action plan. And Scott, I think with only two of us here tonight on the committee, I think we should go ahead and get somebody to assess the building. I think the others would go along with that. I'm not speaking for the others, but I think you need to do that.
I'm guessing by the time somebody's actually lined up and able to come out and start looking, it'll be close to 2 weeks anyways. I mean, I don't think
So
I'll
let's-
pick up the phone. I'll pick up the phone tomorrow, but I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's coming.
You're not going to pick up the phone tonight? What's the matter with you?
Actually, nobody will answer.
I got a call years ago. 7:30 in the morning. I was going to go take a shower. So, something off of Shore Ave. They wanted to know. It's like, I have to go to work in a half an hour. I'm just taking a shower. But anyway, this has been great, everyone.
What I'll try to do is I'll get your meeting posted for the 21st,
Yes.
but I'll see if Kevin Tachi can send me the link to the meeting,
Hmm?
the link to this video, and I can send it out to everybody on your board so they can rewatch it in a timely manner before the 21st.
And Kevin, I just want to give you a shout out. Thank you for not recording my wife and I at the supper tonight, but if you did, that's okay. And thank you for recording this meeting tonight. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your good work.
No problem, Bruce.
I guess, as a planner, I get excited when people get interested in this sort of thing. So, my wife would tell you I have interest in things that I find exciting, like doing housing plans, but it's put food on our table for a very long time. Well, thank you, everyone. We're approaching the hour. I appreciate your time tonight. I wish more people had been able to attend. Ron and Pam, I know you're out there somewhere. Thank you very much for participating in this. I think we should make them members of this committee down the road. But
You would have had a quorum if you did.
hey, Ron, you want to be on this committee, buddy?
All right, I'll see you guys later.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.
Stay cool.